Epistemology is one of the four major subdisciplines of philosophy, the other three being metaphysics, or the study of the ultimate nature of the universe, logic, or the study of the basic rules of reasoning, and ethics, or the study of what we morally ought to do. Questions concerning the ethics of belief would then overlap both with epistemology and with ethics, and also insofar as it dabbles in theology or the nature of a deity and arguments for and against a deity's existence, also with metaphysics because it's included under that heading. There's a famous argument by a guy named Pascal that has a lot to do with the ethics of belief. And Pascal says that when we consider the philosophical arguments for and against the existence of God, they seem to be of roughly equal weight. You have good arguments for and good arguments against, and a person might come to the conclusion that reason just doesn't tell us decisively one way or the other. Well, he says you've got to choose one way or the other. You can't just remain agnostic and undecided. And he argues that when you make this decision, you should consider what's at stake and what you have to lose and what you have to gain one way or the other. That was a small but very loud motorcycle. And what you have at stake here, on the one hand, if you believe and you're correct, you have your eternal soul to gain. If you don't believe and you're incorrect, you have your eternal soul to lose. If you believe and you're incorrect, so what? You lived a pretty good life anyway. You're going to be a better person, a better friend. You're going to stay out of trouble. If you believe, so what options do I consider? You believe you're correct, eternal soul. Believe and you're incorrect, you're okay anyway. Don't believe and you're incorrect, you're eternal damnation. Don't believe and you're correct, no big deal. You just die anyway, right? Doesn't matter. So he says, when you consider what you have to gain and what you have to lose, just go ahead and believe in light of the fact that evidence seems to be roughly equal one way or the other. If you buy his wager, if you buy this argument, you have difficulty believing anyway, you can't just bring yourself to make that decision. He says, do the things that the believer does. Go to church, read the liturgy, pray, etc., and eventually you'll become a person who can believe more. This is his argument. There's a guy named William Clifford who made an argument very much to the contrary. Clifford argued that we have a moral obligation to believe things to the extent that we have appropriate evidence for them, and we have no justification or no right to make these sorts of leaps of belief without proper evidence. And Clifford offers the example of a ship owner who has good reason to question the seaworthiness of his ship, but he rationalizes that it'll be okay, no big deal, I'm sure it'll be fine. And as a result, the ship sinks and hundreds of people drown. And so with this example in mind, Clifford says we have an obligation to only believe things when we have sufficient evidence to do so. Alan Wood is a contemporary philosopher who extends Cliffordian evidentialism, as we might call it, and he says we have an obligation to believe to the extent that we have evidence to support our beliefs. And here, of course, evidence would concern non-empirical arguments. Philosophical arguments would suffice or would count under that heading. So too would physical evidence, and you can combine the two, etc. And he says we have both self-regarding and other-regarding reason to only believe things to the extent that we have good evidence to do so. The self-regarding reasons would include the fact that our rational capacities and the fact that we have these rational capacities give us dignity. And when we don't use those rational capacities, when we disregard them, we disregard an obligation to use that good sense. And so if we just haphazardly believe things because they seem to be convenient, or they're reassuring to us, or they help us fit in with our culture, those are shameful reasons to believe things. He thinks that's a cowardly way to believe, and he says instead we should unabashedly pursue the truth and follow reason wherever it may lead. Those are the self-regarding reasons to only believe things to the extent that we have good evidence and good reason. The other regarding reasons would bring us right back to Clifford's example of the people who drown because the ship owner was sloppy in his belief and he didn't go through his due diligence to ensure his ship was seaworthy, but instead just reassured and rationalized himself that it would be okay. And he also provides the example of religious fundamentalists who in some cases believe the things that they do as a matter of religious faith and not because they have good evidence or they've considered various arguments for and against. And they act on their fundamentalist beliefs in a way that is severely detrimental to the welfare of others. And this could range from anything from the subjugation of women and the denying them of education to the active killing and torturing of non-believers. So there you go. There's Wood's arguments and some of his implications. Two other authors to consider within the ethics of belief. One would be William James. William James argued that we can only believe things when the choice to believe is a live choice, that the hypothesis or the claim that we're considering is a live hypothesis or a live option. And by live, what he means is, at the very least, it has to be a possibility that this thing could be true. So, for example, right now you couldn't pay me any amount of money or threaten me in any way and cause me to genuinely accept the claim that the sky is green. Unless the sky were to actually turn green, it's just not something I can choose to believe. I have no control over whether or not I believe that, regardless of what the stakes might be. But when it comes to the existence of a deity, that's an option that at the very least is possible, and perhaps given the weight of evidence and the balance of reasons, possibly it's probable. But in any case, it would have to first be a live option before I could choose to believe it. Some overlap with Wood. Wood argues that we have no responsibility to believe things that are not live options for us, and I think James would agree. In fact, I'm sure James would agree. So at the very least, it has to be a live option first. And so that's James's primary contribution here. And he goes on to say that it's okay to go ahead and believe in religious claims and various religious things for the sorts of reasons that Wood and Clifford would argue were deplorable, and especially Wood. He's pretty hard on folks that would believe for personally reassuring or for socially convenient or advantageous reasons. Last, we'll consider the arguments of Lampert. And Lampert simplifies and overviews the argument of Alvin Plantinga. And Plantinga argues that at the very least we can believe that a deity exists on grounds that it is a basic belief. And a basic belief in the sense that it is something we can directly know, similar to the way that we can directly know that we exist, that we have hands, that we're not trapped in the matrix, and that we're not the only entities in the universe and everything else a figment of our imagination. Now, of course, we can't know with 100% complete certainty that we're not trapped in the matrix right now. It's at the very least possible. There are arguments for and against why we might have some degree of certainty, but not absolute certainty that we're not trapped in the matrix. It could be the case that the universe was brought about 5 minutes ago, and all of these memories that I think that I have were just implanted in my brain. I think I rode a four-wheeler when I was a little kid. I think I graduated from the University of Tennessee. I think that I'm married with 3 kids. Maybe all that stuff was just implanted. That could be the case. And maybe I and everyone you know is simply a character in a dream that you're having right now. You can't know with complete certainty that that's not the case. However, Plantinga argues that we go ahead and can believe that those claims are not true, that other people really are real, that the universe didn't come about 5 minutes ago, because this is just something we can directly know, and we're justified in holding those beliefs even if we can't have 100% certainty. Plantinga argues that we can have similar certainty about the existence of God. He thinks we can just directly sense the fact that God exists, and that gives us a warrant or a justification for that belief. So there you go, some musings on the ethics of belief and an overview of some key authors involved in that conversation.